President Biden is saying not so fast as questions surrounding Ukraine joining NATO arise. The president told CNN over the weekend that having the country join the alliance would be premature amid its ongoing war with Russia, saying if the war is going on, then we're all in war. Peter Tchir is still with us, Academy Securities head of macro strategy. Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman are still with us. I've also been seeing some reports this morning, guys, that the president of Ukraine might actually be going to the NATO meeting in Lithuania. So obviously Ukraine is going to be a huge topic of conversation there. Peter, I want to take you first on this because I know you have some members, some retired members of the military on the board of your company. So I imagine this is a big topic of discussion for you. What are some of the things that we should be watching for going into this NATO meeting?
Yeah, so Academy Securities, we're about 50% staffed by veterans, but we also have what we call our geopolitical intelligence group, which is 17 retired generals and admirals. So they serve on a lot of this. And we don't see any way that Ukraine joins NATO. If you take a look, even for Ukraine to join the EU, I think they only meet 2 out of 7 qualities, right? There's still a lot of corruption. There's a lot of negative things about Ukraine. So I don't think NATO's prepared to step up and have this. There might be much bigger promises about future invasions and things, but I think the pressure, though, is mounting on Zelensky to come to the table and form some sort of truce or peace agreement with Putin. And we see it from our side, I think, where we're supplying the weaponry. The problem that doesn't get enough attention, I think, is Europe is dealing with this influx of refugees from Ukraine, and the longer they are outside of Ukraine, they start putting their kids into local schools. They start developing ties to this new community. It's much harder for them to move back to Ukraine, especially if their house is, bombed out, if you've got infrastructure issues. So I think you're going to see a lot more talk and trying to convince Zelensky to say, hey, Putin, we can come to some sort of, peace, truce, stalemate on this thing and move on because it's good for both countries. And so there might be some support to back Ukraine a little bit more, but definitely not NATO.
Rick, is there an overwhelming response that we've heard from other countries going into this meeting and with this potentially on the table?
Well, I have a little different view on this. I think one of the things that is at stake here is the message to Putin that comes out of this meeting. And nobody thinks Ukraine is going to join NATO anytime soon. The way Biden has phrased it is Ukraine cannot join NATO until the war is over. So an important question is will NATO basically come out and say that on a united basis at this summit? And if they don't, if they sort of just give Ukraine the hand, that is going to look like a win for Putin, because it's going to look like NATO is kind of turning a shoulder against Ukraine. On the other hand, if NATO says, yes, we see a path forward for Ukraine joining NATO, here is the path. And it's going to start with ending this war. That would bolster Ukraine. And by the way, I'm not so sure that there is mounting pressure on Ukraine to make some kind of deal with Russia. I mean, look, Russia is still sending missiles and drones into cities all across Ukraine. I mean, they're bombing apartment buildings and schools still. There is no way Ukraine is going to agree to anything. You do have to start thinking about how does this end. But this so-called counteroffensive that the United States and Europe have been arming Ukraine for is just getting started. And I don't think you're going to hear any public pressure on Zelensky to say, make some kind of deal with Russia, because that would just undermine what they're trying to do with this counteroffensive. They're trying to, retake territory and dislodge Russia from eastern Ukraine. So this is going to play out for some period of time, for sure.
Peter, from an investment perspective, do you think that most of the sort of NATO, Russia, Ukraine risk has been priced into the market here, or is there some sort of risk that we still need to be watching for?
Yeah, I think the bulk of the risk has been priced in. I think what we not priced in is if you get some sort of retaliation from Putin or the Wagner Group resurfaces with something bad to do, right? Because it's that whole thing played out very weirdly. And I think the sad part of this, though, is, when we had the Wagner Group marching on Moscow, allegedly, it was like, oh, maybe we could get peace. Maybe Putin will have to back down. And the realization I think I had is it doesn't really do much for markets at this point. It's the way we are trading global energy is never going back to how it was pre-invasion. Russia is going to never go back to selling a lot of cheap energy to Germany. They're going to sit with their new client base, which is India and China. So I think even if we get some sort of peace, it's not this huge rebound for the global economy. I think it'd be good for Europe because you'll do a lot of rebuilding in Ukraine. But I think right now there's this little bit of tail risk that doesn't get priced in. But unfortunately, this is just the status quo, and even peace isn't going to result in a big, tick for stocks, which would have been very different a year ago, right? A quick war that ended peacefully before all these new trade supply chains had been set up. That would have been good for markets. Now I just think it's a non-event, unfortunately.
Yeah. Peter?
Hey guys, one last thing on energy. Let's go back to China. One of the reasons that oil prices are comfortably relatively low, around $72 a barrel, and gasoline prices are around $3.50, is weak demand from China. That's a huge factor in energy markets right now, and that directly affects Americans. So keep an eye on the Chinese economy with that regard.
Yeah, most definitely. Guys, thank you so much. Peter Tchir, Academy Securities Head of Macro Strategy. Thanks for hanging out with us for so long. And Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman, thanks as always.
Bye, guys.